Great. Welcome, everybody. It's wonderful to see you all tonight. I'm Rabbi Bonnie Margulis. I'm the Executive Director of Wisconsin Faith Voices for Justice. We staff the Dane Sanctuary Coalition. We're delighted to have you all join us tonight. I am going to mute myself right now and turn everything over to Ruth Ann Lansness from Orchard Ridge United Church of Christ. Tonight's presentation is being live streamed to Facebook, to the Dane Sanctuary Coalition page. It also will be recorded and posted later on to the Dane Sanctuary Coalition YouTube page and website, so people can watch it later on. We will have some time at the end for Q&A, but if I can ask you for now to stay muted and off camera, that would be really great. So I am going to turn it over to Ruth Ann now. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Bonnie, and a good evening to you all. On the part of for Orchard Ridge United Church of Christ and Dane Sanctuary Coalition, who is co-sponsoring this with us, special greetings to you all. We're very pleased to welcome tonight Aisa Olivarez, who is managing attorney for the Community Immigration Legal Clinic. It's now October 3rd, 2021. And again, thank you for joining us, and take it away, Aisa.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Bonnie. Thank you so much, Ruth Ann. Thank you so much to Orchard Ridge and the Dane Sanctuary Coalition for hosting us today. Before I start to share my screen and before I give a brief introduction of myself, I do want to hold space briefly for the Haitian asylum seekers who are suffering violence currently at our most southern border, for the men and women suffering through immigration detention at the Dodge County Detention Facility here in Wisconsin and at facilities nationally here in the United States. And for those individuals who are anxious for a path to citizenship, who have continually been left out and behind by our Congress and our Senate and our current administration. So thank you again, everybody, for joining us. My name is Aisa Olivarez. I use the pronouns she, her, hers, ella, and I am the managing attorney at the Community Immigration Law Center in Madison, Wisconsin. I identify as Latina Chicana, which is a term representing Mexican Americans who fought politically against discrimination in the 60s. And to me, Chicana signifies the responsibility for my people through active work, and in my case, legal work and in advocacy. I am a graduate of the University of Wisconsin Law School and a member of the American Immigration Lawyers Association. And so I am going to share my screen so that we can I can guide you on my presentation today on immigrant justice and updates on immigrant justice. So can everybody see my screen okay? Does it switch okay too?
Yeah, it looks great.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, and patience with me technology-wise, because I am sort of managing two different screens here as we're live, on Facebook and through Zoom. So the Community Immigration Law Center, I wanted to give you a brief background, is an organization that strives to ensure dignity and access to justice for people, especially those facing deportation, by providing legal representation and consultations, as well as support and education regarding immigration issues for the community at large. We were established in 2009, and we are housed currently within Christ Presbyterian Church. Thank you so much for those of you who are on here from Christ Presbyterian Church, and thank you to CPC for housing us and having this to have a space that is safe for our clients to meet with us as they pursue justice here in our legal system. We have two programs at the Community Immigration Law Center. One is a walk-in clinic currently being held virtually, where we meet with people on the second and fourth Friday of each month on general immigration questions. And this is something that is housed within CPC with Silk, but is through our volunteer immigration attorneys. So we are so grateful to our volunteer immigration attorneys that are here in Madison and in Milwaukee that that allow for this virtual clinic to go on and gives good information to the community on any developments around immigration and any specific questions that they might have on a case, on a particular case. So thank you to those volunteers. We also at Silk provide legal representation to those detained and at risk of deportation. We visit the Dodge County Detention Facility to visit and represent individuals, particularly from Dane County, who are at risk of deportation and are from our communities. So as of the date of this recording, which is October 3rd, 2021, I'm going to give some immigration updates, but things are changing every day. So if you're watching this, even on October 3rd at midnight, it could be a completely different situation. And so please know that anything I say today is as of the date today, October 3rd, 2021, and it does not constitute any sort of legal advice. So what are we going to discuss today? Today, we are going to discuss immigrant justice, any recent immigration updates, as well as detention nationally and in Wisconsin. And the reason I have a whole section just on detention is that the work at Silk is very focused on those individuals who are suffering through detention, particularly in Wisconsin. And so I want to make sure to give everybody an update on that work and the work that we're doing currently around that. And at the end, I will take questions. So please be prepared with any sort of question. Questions during any of this, please feel free to put them in the chat. I am sharing like a second screen, and I have you all on my first screen, so I might not see it right away. But if Ruth Ann or Bonnie, if you can monitor the chat and sort of chime in with any questions that people might have during the presentation, that would be wonderful. And so first we're going to go into talking about immigrant justice. And I feel like it's so important to start with this as a foundation, remembering exactly what the importance of immigrant justice is, right? We know that the United States has long offered a promise of opportunity and safety to arriving immigrants, right? We think about the Statue of Liberty. We think about what is inscripted on the Statue of Liberty, right? And it's important that as communities, we work to ensure that our country safeguards that promise and to ensure that immigrants are treated fairly, equally, and with dignity, right? Our work at Silk is, definitely grassroots work on the ground and in immigration courts. And this work that we do in the detention facilities and in immigration courts has revealed some serious systemic abuses. And we know that these abuses, right, are ongoing, and that although we are no longer under the Trump administration, that things have not necessarily changed significantly, and that we continue to dehumanize immigrants and we continue to criminalize immigrants despite this change in administration, right? Some of the rhetoric has changed, but not a lot of the really systemic issues have changed. And we know that that takes time. But I will speak today as to what some of the changes look like. But as I continue to talk about immigrant justice, one of the things I really wanted to highlight is how special the pursuit of immigrant justice is in Dane County, right? In Madison, Wisconsin, and in Dane County, Wisconsin. I am very lucky to work here in Dane County, to work with Silk, which is an amazing organization with an amazing mission. But here are some other organizations and work that is also going on in Dane County that is so important to the work that Silk does and so important to contributing to immigrant justice locally, right? We have here the Immigrant Affairs Office in Dane County, which is an office housed at the county by social workers that provide critical wraparound services to immigrants in Dane County, and allows our organization to offer holistic representation to our clients. Not every county, I think we're the only county in Wisconsin that has an immigrant affairs office. And it's very possible that we're, also in the Midwest, probably aside from Illinois, alone in this effort of an immigrant affairs office. And so having an immigrant affairs office is huge. Right now it's small, but it's growing. And it's something definitely that is very important to our community in terms of resources and being able to spread resources throughout the community. So the Immigrant Affairs Office of Dane County is contributing to immigrant justice locally. The Community Immigration Law Center, or SILC, has universal representation currently for detained Dane County residents. And what this means is that we receive funding to make sure that anybody in Dane County who is detained by ICE and is placed in removal proceedings and is at risk of deportation is given legal representation in that fight to stay here and reunify with their families. Many people, don't know that when you go to immigration court and you fight to stay here in the United States, you don't necessarily have a lawyer with you. If you cannot afford a lawyer, you do not have one, right? And so our program, this Universal Representation Program, ensures that people do have a lawyer as they pursue their right to stay here in the United States. We also have a recent Center for Dreamers, right, that was brought to fruition by Erica Rosales and Professor Erin Barbado of the UW-Madison. And so we are excited to see the Center for Dreamers open up soon and start to be able to provide services to UW-Madison and the community around deferred action for childhood arrivals, or DACA. So this is huge too, right? Not every university in the nation has a Center for Dreamers, has a place where people can go for resources, for legal resources, on their campus. And so this is a huge development and also something that contributes to immigrant justice here in Dane County. We also have a local bond fund that's housed and managed by Centro Hispano that we're very lucky to have had Dane County residents bonded out of detention because of this local bond fund. We also have a bond fund here, another bond fund that covers the Midwest, that covers Wisconsin residents, not just Dane County residents. So the Midwest Immigration Bond Fund is a bond fund that has been established for anybody in the Midwest, that is Kentucky, Illinois, Indiana, Wisconsin, and Illinois, that also have a bond fund established for them. And when it has funds, gives people the ability to be able to bond out of detention, even if they cannot afford it, right? So sort of we're seeing patterns here, right? Who can afford justice? We know now in Dane County that we have things in place to make sure that people who cannot afford a lawyer, who cannot afford bond, have resources in place to make sure that justice is still served in their case, that they still are able to face an immigration judge and not all alone, right? And that they are still able to reunite with their families often. That bond fund through Centro Hispano and the legal services they provide there also integral to immigrant justice in Dane County. We have our volunteer drivers through the Dane County Sanctuary Coalition. Huge, big cheers to our volunteer drivers through the Dane County Sanctuary Coalition, who have continued to drive people throughout the pandemic to appointments in Milwaukee, to court in Chicago, picking people up from the detention center when they're released and there's nobody else that they can call to come and pick them up. These volunteer drivers are contributing to immigrant justice here in Dane County by offering their time, their vehicles to be able to pick people up and provide them with a safe space in their vehicle. Because we know right now, right, that many immigrants in Wisconsin, particularly those who are undocumented, cannot drive with a driver's license, right? And so these volunteer drivers make sure that people can arrive safely to their destination and continue in their immigrant experience and their immigration cases safely by providing a drivers for them. So huge thing that was established when we first got started at Silk. I remember when all of this kind of took off in 2017, 2018, and it continues now and has continued through the pandemic and has been absolutely huge and so very important to our clients. And we also have Voces de la Frontera and the amazing activism and advocacy that they continue to do in our community to remind us of all of the ways that we can contribute to the immigrant community and the ways that we can raise our voice to support the immigrant community and their path to citizenship. And so, you know, even with all of these wins, right, we have identified gaps in capacity and access to representation locally, especially for non-detained asylum seekers that are at risk of deportation. So together, all of these people continue to work on creative ways to increase capacity and continue to serve our communities. You know, we all wish that we could do more every day. The landscape is constantly changing, and all of these groups continue to come together, to work together, to figure out how we can best serve the immigrant community in Wisconsin. And so, let me see, I'm going to change things here. There we go. So I'm going to go now into some recent immigration updates. I have quite a few, and you know, I know that, you know, we don't have a whole lot of time, so I might be moving fairly quickly, but I know that we have people monitoring the chat in case you have any questions about these updates. And thank you for your patience in advance for any of the noise going on in my household. It is after dinner time and getting ready for bedtime. So thank you all for that patience at this time. So as we move forward, sorry for any tech issues, I'll go into first updates around public charge. So we know that under the Trump administration, the public charge rule that was announced was something that was very harmful for our communities, right? It established this sort of wealth test that was a gatekeeper to who could apply for certain benefits in the United States, who could apply for residency and get their green card and be on a path to citizenship. And we know that that the Biden administration abandoned, right, the rule that was announced by the Trump administration, and it is now going back to the Clinton era rules that instructed officials to consider immigrants a public charge. So we know now that that really broad rule that was announced is no longer in place. One second, I'm having one issue with my apologies. One second as I deal with my mic here. There we go. Can y'all hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And so the announcement for this public charge change was very important, because we now know that the broader rule no longer applies to people here in Wisconsin. So now I'm going to move on to temporary protected status. TPS, or temporary protected status, is granted by the Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security to eligible foreign-born individuals who are unable to return home safely due to conditions or circumstances preventing their country from adequately handling the return. So we know that the Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security can designate TPS due to ongoing armed conflict, such as civil war, an environmental disaster like an earthquake or a hurricane or an epidemic, or other extraordinary and temporary conditions. And so TPS was extended to people in Venezuela. It is important to know that people must register with USCIS, and they do get a temporary stay of deportation and temporary work authorization. Again, this is a temporary status, as it says in its name, but the current countries, there are current countries, a long list of current countries that are receiving protection under temporary protected status, and the most recent announcement, right, was Venezuela, and there have also been announcements about extensions for other countries, and so we know that the Biden administration, right, with the Trump administration announced the protection for Venezuela shortly before the Biden administration came in, so they are recognizing the difficulty that our neighbors in Venezuela are suffering currently. We also have updates around DACA. So we know that there has been ongoing litigation around DACA. It's been in the courts for such a long time. And Biden administration actually recently, just this week, announced that they're making a move to fortify DACA. But you know, this announcement of fortifying DACA is definitely a blow to many people, including advocates and activists in the community who have been working for years for an announcement to path to citizenship, right? So, you know, personally, for me, not speaking under the guise of silk, right, the Biden administration needs to do more to ensure that DACA recipients are able to thrive in their home, right, here in the United States. So although, you know, DACA continues for people who are able to renew, we know that litigation currently has held up the ability for people to apply for the first time. They continue to accept these applications, but these applications are not being reviewed currently by the government. So we know that people can renew DACA. We know that people can apply for advanced parole, and that 1-year grants of deferred action are now being transferred into 2-year grants to deferred action, and 2-year abilities for employment authorization. But we know that more is needed, right? We know that we need a path to citizenship for people. And that's, you know, something that I want to also, you know, update on here, is that we know that a path to citizenship that we were really hoping for in budget reconciliation, you know, was nixed by the parliamentarian. We know that we were most hopeful that that was going to happen, that through budget reconciliation. We know that there's a lot of other bills that are currently pending that are being held up until an official budget is passed. And so, you know, pathway to citizenship through budget reconciliation didn't happen. We had hoped that an update to the date for registry, for the immigration registry, would be updated, and that a path to citizenship would be created that way. And unfortunately, that also didn't happen. And so, you know, as we're on the topic of DACA, this frustration around a pathway to citizenship, not only for DACA recipients, but for our undocumented communities at large, right, is we don't see a path right now, right? There hasn't been anything announced. We know that there's bills that are, you know, are being held up. And so we know that this fight for a path to citizenship continues, you know, in Congress, in Senate. And so, you know, later I'll talk about things that you can do. But right now it's huge that you contact your congressmen, contact your senators, contact people in power in the White House. We need a path to citizenship now. We needed it yesterday. We need it now more than ever. People, especially those people with DACA, those people who are essential workers, deserve a path to citizenship, and a path to citizenship that is not only for those individuals who haven't had contact with law enforcement, right? We don't want a criminal carve out. We want everybody in the United States on a path to citizenship who is undocumented, regardless of their contact with law enforcement. So that's sort of an update, around DACA and the path to citizenship. And, there's been a lot of blows to the path to citizenship over the last couple of weeks. And so please hold space for those people who are experiencing this setback, and, continue to call congressmen, senators to please push a path forward for everybody in the United States who is documented and needs a path to citizenship. Another thing that many have been hearing about in the news lately has been asylum and Title 42. So we know that since March 20th of 2020, the CDC and the Department of Homeland Security have promulgated regulations that have barred the entry and processing of asylum seekers. And because of that, we've seen many, many issues happen at the border that have been horrifying to see since March 20th of 2020. And a lot of it has to do with Title 42, right? Title 42 basically means that Customs and Border Patrol will turn around anyone seeking asylum at the ports of entry. And this is a Trump era border policy that has continued through the Biden administration. And one of the things that is a result of Title 42 is what we have been seeing most recently in the news, and the horrible treatment of Haitian asylum seekers who are coming from a country that is currently in crisis. We know that our Haitian brothers and sisters have traveled through many countries to present themselves at the border to legally seek asylum, and they've been met with violence by Customs and Border Patrol officials on horseback, and images were shown on the news that we wish that we could unsee, right? And so we know right now that that Title 42 is holding many people outside of the border, waiting in Mexico to be processed or for the chance to seek asylum. We also know that many of them are being sent back to their home countries. And so something that is important to think about on what we can do about this is staying in touch with local legal service providers, with the Immigrant Affairs Office of Dane County. It could be possible that we begin to see people reunifying with their families here in Madison and Dane County. So please connect with local entities that are serving asylum seekers. I know many of you have been staying on top of the news. And so it's so very important to stay in contact with the Immigrant Justice Clinic, Jewish Social Services, the Catholic Multicultural Center, Centro Hispano, the Immigrant Affairs Office, who knows, who has a very good handle on the needs of the local immigrant community, because it is possible that although Title 42 exists, that some exemptions to Title 42 might be extended to some of the Haitian asylum seekers. And we might start seeing them reunify with family locally. And so staying in touch with, those people serving the community, with the Dane Sanctuary Coalition, with Orchard Ridge, is really very important. Another thing regarding asylum is we've seen that migrant protection protocols, or the Remain in Mexico policy, go through litigation. It was terminated at some point, and now it is in some way they're trying to reestablish it because of litigation. The Biden administration has come out saying that they will seek to end it legally, so that it's not at risk of litigation and being resurfaced again. And so MPP, or the Migrant Protection Protocols, is sort of kind of up in the air right now. And we know that MPP forces individuals seeking protection from the US to wait in Mexico for the duration of their immigration proceedings. We know that waiting in Mexico for your immigration proceedings is incredibly unsafe. We know that it's unfair. And we know that the best place for people is to be reunified with their families as they seek asylum. And so, even though this has continued to go through litigation, we are hopeful that the Biden administration will begin to create a safeguard around the inability for MPP to resurface and go back to what it was under the Trump administration. One last thing I wanted to cover under asylum and Title 42 is that we also have our Afghan refugees who are seeking protection here in the United States. We have 13,000 people currently here at Fort McCoy. And I believe Fort McCoy is hosting the largest number of Afghan refugees in the country at this time. And so thank you to all of you who have reached out wanting more information, who have made donations. We know that currently people are being processed and interviewed on Fort McCoy. I don't have a lot of other details, but I do know that the possibility exists that also, much like the Haitian asylum seekers, that they do reunify with family locally here in Wisconsin and in Madison. And so keep your ear to the ground about what local legal service providers, social workers, the Immigrant Affairs Office will need as we begin to tend to people who reunify with family here locally. So I will now go into ICE arrests and enforcement. We do know that people continue to be arrested and detained here in the United States. Currently, as of last week, there was over 23,000 people in detention. We do know that most recently on September 30th of 2021, so just last week, the Department of Homeland Security issued a new enforcement priorities that impact immigration enforcement across the country. And it's not a huge change from what was announced initially in January of 2021, but we do know that there have been some important things that have changed. To review, people who are an enforcement priority for arrest here in the United States are people who are seen to be a national security threat, right? So people that the agency alleges are involved in terrorism or espionage or related activities, or who otherwise possess a danger to national security. We also know that people who are apprehended trying to enter the United States undocumented, unlawfully, and people who are apprehended who entered after November 1st of 2020 are also an enforcement priority, and individuals who pose a current threat to public safety, for example, those people who have committed serious criminal conduct, right? And so those are the three enforcement priorities currently for ICE. We know that locally here in Dane County, our numbers as far as people who have been detained has not increased significantly over the last 6 months. We do know that the pattern here in Wisconsin is that people who are arrested usually have some sort of contact with law enforcement. And unfortunately, usually people who have pending charges, who have been unable to face the criminal justice system, or the people who have, or their alleged victims, because sometimes they are detained and deported before they can ever face the criminal justice system. And so some takeaways now around arrest and enforcement is that, it leaves a lot of room for ICE agents to make their own decisions about who they're going to arrest. And so this looks differently, here in Wisconsin to our neighboring state in Minnesota, to our south in Illinois. It gives ICE agents a lot of room and discretion to make their own decisions. And so that's something that, we wished was more, we wish that the discretion wasn't so high, because we see it looked so different in so many different places. Another thing that was announced by the Biden administration just this summer that we are working through, and the last sort of update that I'll go through before I go into immigration detention, is prosecutorial discretion. Basically, when the Trump administration came, started and came into the White House, they announced that we would no longer have the ability to speak with the Department of Homeland Security attorneys the way we did before. Those modes of communication were shut down, and we were no longer able to speak to these attorneys, the government attorneys, on people's deportation cases on a case-by-case basis. That has now reopened, and ICE attorneys in different regions are releasing information on how we could speak with them on particular deportation cases, and they have been given the ability to exercise prosecutorial discretion on a case-by-case basis. And so they're looking at each case and deciding whether or not they're going to pursue these cases, whether or not they're going to continue to work toward or prosecute cases to deportation, right? Or if they're going to dismiss proceedings and allow people to stay here with their families, and not pursue deportation against them. And so this has been a huge development, because it allows us to advocate for our clients outside of the courtroom, and really introduce the equities that humanize our clients before these government attorneys, asking them to dismiss their cases and dismiss their deportation proceedings. So I will leave room for questions, but just as I wrap up, I told you at the beginning, I like to go through the immigration detention piece because it is a piece that is so close to the mission work that we do at the Community Immigration Law Center. And I think it's so important that we remember that, immigrant justice extends to those people who are currently suffering through civil immigration detention, right, inside of jails, just 45 miles north of us, here in Dodge County, in Juneau, Wisconsin. So how many people, right? I talked earlier about how many people are currently in immigration detention. We know as of last week, the ICE website updated that there was 23,806 people currently in civil detention. And as of last week, there's 536 people that are either in quarantine or isolation due to COVID-19, right? The reality of the Delta variant for us is, for people in detention is very real, just like it is for us here, in our homes, in our cities, right? But people in detention cannot socially distance themselves from each other, and they live in a communal setting with guards who move in and out of the facility to their homes and their communities every day and then come back. And so there's risks for people in these facilities to contract COVID-19 and encounter complications is very real. And so 536 people are currently, right, in quarantine or isolation due to COVID-19. We know, right, that people in detention who are suffering through the violence of immigration detention are from countries, like Mexico, El Salvador, Honduras, Guatemala, right, Haiti, Ghana, the places, right, the definitely we are seeing a pattern here of that, a focus on detention of people in our Black and Brown communities, right? They trickle down from our broken criminal justice system and the people that we see overrepresented in our jails. I wanted to show a just quick map of all of the ICE detention locations, right? So when I throw out that 23,000 number, right? Was it 23,800 number? These are the facilities that they are being held in nationally. Locally, it's here at the Dodge County Detention Facility in Juneau, Wisconsin. ICE contracts with the Dodge County to hold people in this facility. And I believe that they contract approximately 200 beds there for people at risk of deportation. So I talked about this a bit earlier, but arrests in our Dane County community are definitely, since COVID-19 have gone down, we do continue to see Dane County residents detained outside of our county in surrounding counties after possible law enforcement involvement. And so we are constantly, as an organization, staying on top of that so we can continue to make sure that we serve individuals from Dane County who are at risk of deportation. Our visits to the facility are ongoing and have been ongoing through the COVID-19 pandemic. And we thank Professor Erin Barbado and her students at the UW Law School for doing intakes with those people who are seeking legal representation in the facility so that we can make sure that we meet with everybody who we know needs help, even if we can't extend formal representation to them. And one last thing I wanted to cover before we wrap up is the universal representation program that we do have at Silk that I mentioned earlier. It was one of our 2 programs at Silk that we house inside of CPC. Individuals detained by the Department of Homeland Security and at risk of deportation have the right to an attorney, but not the right to a publicly funded attorney. So unlike criminal proceedings, there is no right to a government appointed counsel in deportation proceedings. Deportation cases are the only legal proceedings in the United States in which people are routinely detained by the federal government and are required to litigate for their liberty against trained government attorneys without the assistance of counsel. So universal representation is a notion that every individual at risk of deportation should have access to an immigration attorney, regardless of whether they can afford it or not. And so the impact of this program on Dane County is that from September 2017, and these are our numbers through July of 2021, we have represented 126 clients and 113 children with a parent have been represented. Our clients have about 10 years average here in the United States. And as of July 2020, 39% of our completed cases have achieved successful outcome in court. And I know you think 39%, that's low, right? One, we represent people on a universal representation basis, regardless of the merits of their case. So regardless of the strength of their case or any sort of outlying issue, we represent them from beginning to end. And also 39% is compared with a 3% national success rate for people who are unrepresented, right? So having an attorney matters. And the Community Immigration Law Center makes sure that people from Dane County have an attorney if they cannot afford one. And so I will wrap up and just show my contact information in case anybody has follow-up questions or would like to have more information about either our deportation project, our universal representation project, or our walk-in clinics, which are currently virtual. And so with that, I wanted to leave 15 minutes for questions, and I think we are at exactly 7:15, so I'm going to stop share. And I please, feel free to leave any questions in the chat. And I think I don't know if we have any right now. I'm going to take a quick sip of water because I've been talking.
Yes, no, you've been amazing. Thank you, Aisa. This has been incredibly helpful and informative. If anybody has questions, please type them in the chat. We do have one question right now from Gil Emmert at First Baptist. Hi, Gil. He asks, are immigrants from Haiti eligible for temporary protective status? It seems they ought to qualify.
Right. And my belief and my understanding around TPS is that you have to have been in the United States to apply for temporary protected status for the United States to extend that protection to you. And those people who are coming to our most southern border right now, the images that we're seeing on the news are individuals who are coming now to seek asylum, and they don't have the ability to do so because of Title 42. And so it seems like, hey, we have temporary protected status for Haitians. We know that their country currently is suffering through crisis. Why would we be deporting people back? It doesn't make a lot of sense. And we know, right, that the Biden administration needs to extend some sort of protection and ability to seek asylum currently. And we know that that isn't possible. So yeah, I know it doesn't seem, it's not intuitive at all. And it's unfortunate.
Thank you. So I know we've had a lot of conversations about what some of the most pressing needs are that you see for undocumented immigrants, asylum seekers, and refugees here in Dane County. Do you want to say a few words about what some of those needs are?
Sure. It's, they've, our needs have been, I think, developing over the years. Thinking about this first slide I showed around all of the great things happening in Dane County, I mentioned it with the caveat that every time we create something new, then we identify another gap, right? And so I would say that the needs currently definitely are for more capacity, for legal representation for people who are not detained, right? Silk does take non-detained cases on a discretionary basis, but we have seen some people who, in spite of Title 42, have been reunified with families here in Wisconsin and in Dane County, and we've been meeting with them without the ability to extend them full legal representation when they have to go to Chicago. And so, our dream is to really be able to close that gap and extend legal representation to people who are not detained. We also know, right, that we have, currently, people who are in detention and who are unable to bond out. And so there is a local bond fund through Centro Hispano, and the Madison Community Foundation. I believe the funds can go to the Madison Community Foundation for that. And Centro Hispano has been making sure that we bond people out when it's necessary. The Midwest Immigration Bond Fund, MIBFC.org, also gives funds to people who are detained in Wisconsin and are seeking release. And so that is also really very important. As far as other needs, I would definitely, stay in touch with us, with the Immigrant Affairs Office. Fabiola Hamden, Yesenia Villalpando all have a really great grasp on what's happening locally. I know that right now we're sort of triaging and making sure that people get good information. But financial support is always a big need. But I don't know, Rabbi Bonnie, can you talk about the volunteer drivers? I know that has been so huge for our clients and has been a necessary service. And I know that it's ongoing. So if people could volunteer to be a volunteer driver for people, that has been so essential to our operations. And aside from that, anybody who wants to sponsor asylum seekers or give housing, as well, I think that you could also probably get in touch with Rabbi Bonnie, as we continue to all work together as a community to organize around that.
Yes, thank you. So I'm putting into the chat the Gmail address for the Dane Sanctuary Coalition. So if people have questions, want more information on anything that Aisa mentioned, or if you want to volunteer for anything or make a donation, you can get in touch with us and we will connect you with the right resource or the right organization. So the Dane Sanctuary Coalition has a volunteer driver program. It is staffed, well, it is volunteer staffed by two amazing volunteers from First Unitarian Society and Temple Bethel, and Dorit Bergen and Dan Zimmerman. They are just amazing in running this program. If you are interested in volunteering, I will connect you with Dorit and Dan. They are available to train you one-on-one. If we have a critical mass of people who are interested, we may do a Zoom training for a bunch of people all at once. And once you are trained, you will be in, and it's a very simple, quick training. You'll be put onto the volunteer list, and as we get requests from Aisa or from Fabiola in the Immigrant Affairs Office or from some of the other immigration attorneys who contact us, we put out a call saying we need a driver on X date to take somebody potentially to Milwaukee for their ICE check-in or potentially to Chicago for their immigration hearing. Occasionally we are asked to bring somebody within Dane County to a medical appointment or to some other non-immigration related need, but generally speaking, it's an immigration related need. And if you are available, then you just respond and say, hey, I'm available on that date. There is no obligation. If you're not available, it's perfectly fine. We do have COVID protocols in place so that everybody stays safe. And again, that's part of the training that Dorrit and Dan will provide. So if you are interested in volunteering for that, please contact danesanctuary@gmail.com. Also wanted to mention in our last few minutes, but please, if anybody has any questions, please put it in the chat. We have gotten a request from the Catholic Multicultural Center from their immigration attorneys for potentially people who are willing to be sponsors for Afghan refugees who might be coming into the country under humanitarian parole. And that is a specific kind of program with a specific kind of sponsorship. So we are going to have a webinar on October 28th at 7 p.m. with Janice Spears from Catholic Multicultural Center so that she can answer your questions about what that would entail if you are interested in being a sponsor. So it's a very specific kind of thing. And Aisa can probably say more about what that is than I can.
Thanks, Rabbi Bonnie. And there's so many different opportunities, I think, to volunteer, and the Dane Sanctuary Coalition and the other faith-based organizations like Orchard Ridge have a good handle on what our needs are because we all stay in touch so well and often. I think that opportunities like this to learn more are so important. Getting this information and spreading it to your family members about, what is immigrant justice? Who are the people in our communities who need help and why do they need help? Seeing the injustice and hearing about the injustice in these systems and working to fix it is what we need, right? We need your voice more than anything. Please call your congressmen, call your senators. A pathway to citizenship would be so big for so many people in our community. And it's something, right? Reform, we haven't had reform around a pathway to citizenship since the 80s. Right? It's been long overdue, and it's something that definitely needs to happen. And then as far as Rabbi Bonnie talked about, the Afghan refugees and housing, that's great. I'm so happy that Janice will be hosting a webinar. And so I would defer to her expertise on that day, but it's definitely a great opportunity to give people a place to safely relocate, a place to live. And basically what you're doing is you're affirming to the government that they will have everything that they need in your home, shelter, resources, food, while they go through their legal proceedings, whatever legal proceeding that is. And it varies. Currently, it varies for the people from Afghanistan. Their legal process varies from, it's on a case-by-case basis. So I think, definitely tuning in today is a huge start for so many. And please, use your voice for immigrant justice. I think Voces de la Frontera is having Dia Sin Latinos on October 11th. And in Milwaukee, and that's going to be big because the big focus right now around organizing is a path to citizenship. And so contact those in Congress, contact those in the Senate, contact the people in the White House. This is something that needs to be a priority.
Thank you. So we have just a few more minutes, and I just want to give people an opportunity. If anybody's having trouble locating the chat, and if you just want to unmute yourself and ask a question, I'm going to give you a minute to see if anybody has any last questions. We have some information in the chat. First, Aisa put her or Silk's website in the chat. So please go there, please donate. Pete Haney from James Reed is letting us know that the Madison chapter of Voces de la Frontera is gathering at 9 a.m. in front of Centro Hispano, which is at 810 Badger Road, West Badger Road, on October 11th to go to Milwaukee for the day and to contact Nindic Figueredo. And I'll put, I think it's just organizer at VDLF is her email address, if I'm correct.
Thanks, Peter. Thanks, Peter, for sharing that. Yes, you know, this is an opportunity to use your body, use your voice, to show how much support there is in Wisconsin for a path to citizenship.
One other need that Aisa alluded to that's specific to Wisconsin is legal driver's license. Up until 2007, undocumented immigrants had legal driver's license in Wisconsin, and that right was taken away. So we need that right to be restored, not just so that people can get safely to immigration hearings, but so people can get to work and to school and to the grocery store, to medical appointments, without being afraid that a broken tail light or some other minor traffic issue is going to get them stopped and get them detained. So please contact your Wisconsin State Assembly and State Senator and tell them that we need a legal driver's license here in Wisconsin.
Yes, thank you, Bonnie, for bringing that up. That is also so huge for our local communities, right? Driver's license and in-state tuition, right? In-state tuition for those individuals who can't show proof of lawful permanent residency or U.S. citizenship. Those are two things that we had hoped would be possible under the Evers administration, that we hoped would pass and be available to people, and unfortunately are being held up. And so another way, again, thank you, Rabbi Bonnie, for bringing that up, to use your voice and your body for immigrant justice is a driver's license for all in Wisconsin and in-state tuition.
Well, thank you so much, Aisa. This has been so incredibly helpful and informative, and we really appreciate your time. And we really appreciate the leadership from Orchard Ridge United Church of Christ, who sponsored tonight's event and also is sponsoring a donation drive to Silk. Again, please, if you're able to make a donation to any of the organizations that Aisa mentioned, and we'll send out some follow-up information to everyone about some of the great work that's being done and some of the organizations that Aisa has mentioned tonight. So with that, thank you all so much. Please look to our Facebook page and our website and our YouTube channel in the next couple of days for the video to be up, and then share it widely with your congregations, with your organizations, your networks, your friends, your family, everybody you know. We look forward to continuing our work together. Have a great night, everyone.